Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Niagara Falls experience, episode 15. We've done this 15 times, which is perfect because it is February 15th, 2023. So 15 for 15. That's kind of cool. As always, well, if this is your first episode, welcome. I don't know why you're starting at episode 15, but we're happy you're here. If it's not, as always, I am Nico, the American, even though there's a Canadian flag behind me. We'll talk about that in a bit. And I am being joined by Peter, my Canadian, who
how's it going, eh?
just like the first episode, he's stuck in his box.
Well, no, we gave Julian the evening off because we had a recording production here earlier tonight, and or earlier today, so it was a little easier. But we do miss Nico, and we hope you're at home recovering by watching TV.
We miss Nico.
Oh, wait a minute, Julian! What am I saying? Oh,
I mean, I'm not here. I'm not here
been
mentally,
a long
but
day. No, you're right, Julian, not Nico. We miss Nico when you're not here. But yes, we gave Julian the night off, so
yes.
It's me and Nico tonight.
Hi. Yes, it's been a long week, Peter. Forever.
But you've had a long week today, haven't you?
I've had a long month in the last 5 hours. It's been a long year, and it's only February 15th. You know.
And it goes on forever.
It does.
But you had a crappy day. I mean, we're not going to go into the details because I'd probably start snickering more. No, actually, I had more fun listening to your reaction to stuff.
There's a lot of arm noodling going on today.
Arm noodling. That is so cool.
Arm noodling. Like wacky waving inflatable tube men. But no, yeah, it's been an interesting week. It's been an interesting week here in Niagara Falls. I don't know if interesting is the word I want to use. It's been an eventful week in Niagara Falls. There's been some things that have happened.
Well, we've had a tragedy.
Yes.
You know, and not you and I, of course, but this past Monday, I believe it was. Yes, it was an unfortunate incident where a woman and her son climbed the fence, the railing at overlooking Terrapin Point and Cable of the Winds on Goat Island, and sadly lost their balance and fell. The young boy is 5 years old. All we know so far, he did have emergency surgery for a head injury, and he is in critical condition, and sadly his mother lost her life. So it was a tragedy, and first of all, if there is a silver lining to anything like that, I cannot tell you how much our state parks police and our state park staff and our fire department and emergency medical personnel, they rushed to the scene, and they were definitely there very quickly and did everything they could to assist with it. So, I mean, we are blessed that we do have such really strong, emergency services here to call upon. So that's something I think is a real advantage for us, because we are an international destination, and we remember the entire world comes here. But you made a very good point during pre-production today about where they are coming to visit.
Yes, one of the things about Niagara Falls, and there's two different facets to this story. One of them is Niagara Falls is a wonder of the world. It is a natural wonder of the world. Unfortunately, it is a high-profile tourist destination, and with most high-profile tourist destinations, the other one that comes to mind immediately would be the Grand Canyon. There are people that will come here, unfortunately, who are in distress, and incidents do occur. So that is something that does happen here. There are measures in place within the state park. There are procedures to mitigate that as best as possible, and reach out to help these people. But these incidents do occur. Unfortunately, it is what happens when you are, as beautiful as Niagara Falls is. There are people that unfortunately do these, this does happen to them, and it's upsetting. It's very sad, but it is something that we live with here in Niagara Falls. It's not something that is, we don't publicize it. We don't, it's not something that we, ever sensationalize or really, bring to light. It's more important that, and there are crisis services throughout Niagara Falls and Western New York and the Canadian side in Ontario that go out of their way, especially within the Niagara region, to help those that are coming here that may be suffering from crisis. Now, on the other end of the chain, Niagara Falls is also a natural wonder. And this is really what I wanted to talk about today, is that with the natural wonder comes nature. And nature is not always safe. And there are times within the parks where there are people that either they may not be following the safety barriers, reading the signage, or they may not be properly equipped for a certain area. So there are hiking trails all throughout Niagara Falls, and those hiking trails range all the way from simple, easy walks, just light, they're considered level 1. They're just, it's kind of like walking the street. Those are the upper rim trails, pretty much that entire upper trail. It's a road. And it's very nice and they're beautiful. But it goes all the way up to like class 5 trails, which are for expert hikers. And those trails can change, especially in the lower gorge. They change fairly rapidly, and there is signage denoting these. But you do have situations, even with the most experienced hikers, where there are, because of the way the gorge is, it is a natural landscape. There can be rock slides, you can lose your footing. And that goes back to what Peter was talking about at the beginning of the show, which was that the Parks Police Department, the local fire departments, the Canadian Parks Police, the Coast Guard, in fact, is also involved in these. And even the Niagara Falls Police sometimes are involved, depending on the location. Most of them, they are actually trained in rescue operations, and they all work in tandem to help individuals that may become trapped, may find themselves unable to get through certain areas. And those are the people who, they could have been equipped and were, following all the rules and they went through. And then there's people that maybe went on something that was a little bit more than what they were prepared for, got in a sticky spot. And then there are situations, and these are the ones where people don't necessarily take the nature part of Niagara seriously. I have seen these ones as well, and these are the people that are doing things because they can. And they're not allowed to, but they see that they can. And they don't necessarily see the danger because it doesn't look dangerous. Niagara Falls, the water underneath Niagara Falls, the rapids up top as well. The rapids are a bit more obvious, but there are people, believe it or not, that will try to go to the edge of the rapids. They'll climb the barrier, they'll try to get closer to the water, and there are people that, have slid in and needed to be rescued or unfortunately gone over. It has happened. And that's what, there are barriers in place to prevent that. However, some people, a barrier is only as good as your respect for the barrier. But then even down below, there's areas where the water's a flat calm underneath the falls, and you look at it and it's perfectly calm, and you think, I could go in this water. And what you don't realize is, one, there is an undercurrent that is still moving very quickly, and two, that the water may be calm here, but 100 meters down, you're in class 6 rapids. It changes very rapidly. Same thing with our hiking trails. They're, very flat, and if that sign says a level 5, and you're like, well, this doesn't look like a level 5, this looks like a light trail, and you start walking, and suddenly you're in a level 5 trail because there are, rocks and uneven and slides and trees and there's a lot. One of the common unfortunate ones that I see is climbing the railing at Prospect Point. And the reason the railing is so far back at Prospect Point is for your safety, and also because people don't realize this. Prospect Point broke off. The Prospect Point you see now is not what all of Prospect Point was. It is a natural wonder. There was a rock slide, and Prospect Point did break off in the 1950s. The reason why these barriers are so far back is, one, to protect you, say there's a high wind or something. They want to make sure that there is a lot of land there as a buffer and protect you. Also, because there can be a rock slide. Now, we've gotten better geologically at predicting rock slides, and there haven't been many major ones since dewatering the falls in '69. Part of the reason we dewatered the falls in 1969 was to
Sorry about that. I'm looking for a video for you.
Oh, right. Part of the reason we dewatered the falls in 1969 was actually to see what we could do about the rapid erosion of the falls, and they did some things, but at the end of it, they actually said that there is no 100% certainty that portions of the gorge aren't going to break off. And it actually has a line in it that says, visitors assume the risk, however minor, that these incidents may occur. In fact, we had an earthquake last week, it didn't cause any damage or anything. It was a very minor earthquake. But, we are a natural wonder, and there are incidents that happen. We actually have a video of the Niagara rock slide.
Yeah, this was 1956. And as you were mentioning, let me just get it there for you. It doesn't seem to want to.
Doesn't want to be where it wants to be.
Oh, wait 1 moment.
There
we go.
These sensational pictures were taken by Movietone's cameramen at the world-famous Niagara Falls.
That's the point.
The first appearance of these telltale cracks persuaded us to start a round-the-clock vigil high up over the thundering chasm. The cameras are set up on Prospect Point, while workmen make a vain attempt to avert the catastrophe. But these puny efforts are useless in face of the irresistible surge of such a cataract. Risking life and limb, and cameras too, Movietone was rewarded by these breathtaking pictures as the rock face shuddered and gave way. These newsreel pictures are some of the finest ever taken of such a spectacle, revealing the terrifying power of Niagara as 185,000 tons of rock go reeling into the abyss.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that is that rock is all still down there.
Yes.
That's a lot of the crow's nest is that rock. And going back to my point about climbing and going over railings, the crow's nest is a favorite spot for people because the design of the crow's nest is to be a little bit more naturally inclined than, say, the Cave of the Winds. There's a lot less railing in place. It isn't uncommon for people to go off the marked path. There is a sign that says, do not climb rocks, do not go off the marked path. There are people that will still go off the path, and they'll go either towards the water, they'll climb down towards the water, which we said there's a dangerous undertow, it's not safe to do that, or they like to climb the boulders. They either climb the center, there's a large center boulder at the bottom of the crow's nest that they'll climb on top of, which is not necessarily safe. It's constantly wet, it is very slippery, and it's on a very sharp 45-degree angle. Or they will even go as far as to climb over the stair railing and start climbing the rocks closer to the falls. And if you do that, you can be arrested. At minimum, you will be fined. Parks Police does show up for that. So you climb over a railing at Prospect, Parks Police are going to be there to stop you. And they're doing this not to be a party pooper and ruin your Instagram photo. And I've had people very upset because they just wanted to take a photo, a really cool shot. And the Parks Police have made it very clear. It is dangerous. And it is dangerous for you as a guest. And it is dangerous for those that are coming to help you. It is, and that is where credit is credit, credit where credit is due. Our Parks Police, our fire department, our, even Coast Guard, they have to put themselves at risk sometimes to help these people, whether they accidentally were stuck in a situation or they did it on purpose. So what I always stress for tourists that are looking to do things, please follow the rules. Please stay within, the marked path, stay on the marked paths, stay behind the rails. There's beautiful shots there. It's beautiful there. I've spent my entire life here and I never climbed a railing. It's just as beautiful on this side of the railing, and it's safe. It's a lot safer here, and it's in place. Do yourself a favor, and because at best you'll be in trouble with Parks Police. At worst, something can happen to you that would be very bad, and we don't want that. And nobody wants that. And we want your Niagara Falls experience to be enjoyable, but we also want it to be safe. One of my biggest pet peeve ones is there's a rock it's a rock boulder with a plaque, and it's just saying, it's about Father Louis Hennepin, the first European to see the falls. It just says, Father Louis Hennepin stood near this place, and there's a lovely bench there, and it's great. People like to stand on top of that rock because they think it's a great photo, so they'll stand on top of the rock. Now, the height of the rock is about the same height as the guardrail along the edge of the gorge, and that rock is located right on the edge of the gorge. It is about a 180-foot drop on the other side of that railing. When people stand on that, I walk by that because it's, it's part of my walking area. It's in the park. I see it. I have told people before, hey, I don't think that's a good idea. This is a decorative rock. You're next to a railing. It's very high up. I understand you want that cool photo of being, some outdoorsman, action shot. I wouldn't recommend it. Same thing in Whirlpool. There's some outjuts. There's one specific one I want to say on the Whirlpool Trail that people will kind of climb over the edge to take a photo there. And they go over the railing, and don't do it. Same thing with Art Park. There's one specific one. There's a big rock out in Art Park, and I've seen some people that they like to hang out there. I once saw someone picnicking on the other side of the railing, and that, just don't do it. Just please don't make our first responders' jobs hard. Harder than it has to be for emergency situations.
Yep.
Their priority is always to take care of emergency situations and be ready. And if they're tied up because you were doing something you weren't supposed to be doing, it takes away from people who accidentally got themselves in a situation. So that's why we always stress, and tour guides always stress this with people. That's why they say, stay with your group, stay with this, stay within marked paths. The park stresses it a lot throughout the entire hiking trails because we have some very beautiful hiking trails, and there's a lot of information to make sure that you are prepared to have the best Niagara Falls experience possible with, but also incredibly safe.
Absolutely. Well put. And that couldn't say it any better. And it was a very sad week for that occasion, something, though, we are proud of our first responders. And that applies to both sides of the border. We have police on both sides who work with the local communities. And so there are a lot of people in place to protect you while you're here at one of nature's most vivid and explosive areas. As we saw from that video, the rock falling was, that's 185,000 tons of rock.
Yes.
And that was just the that was just one part of
the edge, just the edge of Prospect Point. The other thing I do want to note, because obviously, we're having two simultaneous conversations here, and I want to stress, because we are talking about safety, about, guardrails and following paths. What happened this week was, is a little bit of a different situation. And the other thing I want to say is our first responders, there are people in Niagara Falls that care about you. The people in Niagara Falls we are here, between the parks police, our first responders, crisis services, we are here for you. There's a lot of community outreach here to let people know that, whatever you may be going through, whatever you may be experiencing, there are people here to help you.
That's again, well put. Thank you, Nico. We're going to take a quick break here, visit with one of our winery sponsors, and come right back with the reason for the flag behind Nico. So stand by. On the shoreline of Lake Ontario, just east of Wilson, New York, you'll find a sweet spot that combines old world charm with new world vintages. From the rustic elegance of their grounds to the warmth and enchantment of their tasting room, you'll feel a special welcome to Victorienburg Wine Estate, owned and operated by Victoria and Dan Hogue. Award-winning wine is available for tasting, or for a true adventure of pairing, you can savor the wide variety of award-winning chocolate truffles and their suggested wine partners. From the superb traditional wines to specialty vintages infused with chocolate or other delights, there's something for every palate. No setting on the wine trail can match this marriage of vintage and delicacy. Our tasting room is open daily, Sunday through Friday from noon until 5, and Saturday from 11 to 6. Acres of vineyards, patios, rhythmic fountains, and our rose garden entice you to stroll the grounds after tasting our award-winning wines. Find us at 4402 East Lake Road in Wilson, New York, or online at www.victorienburg.com.
And welcome back, everyone, to your Niagara Falls experience.
Yay! And, of course, Victorienburg Wine Estates up on Highway 18 or Lake Road in the town of Wilson. And they're wonderful, wonderful experience, combining both their chocolate pairings and just their wines themselves. So very proud to have them as part of our show.
Absolutely.
And so now we're going to come to we're going to talk about why there is a Canadian flag behind our American host.
Yeah, that's kind of weird, isn't it?
I know, eh?
But is it really, though? I mean, go check the tape. The Canadian flag has been behind me. At least the maple leaf has been behind me a considerable amount of times.
Landscape? I mean...
IHOP.
Yes. Oh, well, we've got thousands of those to choose from. Yes. You know that. Yeah, Nico and I went to Canada one time to see the Festival of Lights, and Nico kept commenting on how many IHOPs he saw. So
there was 3 within a 2-block radius.
I know.
It was...
That is one international house of pancakes.
When there's more IHOPs than there are Tim Hortons, then I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's really a letdown for Canada. But, by the way, got... Rebecca Rice, one of our good friends, has said hi. She misses us, and we miss her. And John Fidel, nice to see you with us this evening. Hopefully, John was hosting the earlier show that we taped. So good to see you there, John. And so now we're on to the Canadian flag. And I was stumbling around there. Boy, I miss Julian, I got to tell you. So today is the National Flag of Canada Day. And I have some information on it that Nico and I are going to talk about. So we all know that the Canadian flag is... no, you don't have to move, eh? It's like I could put a whole flag in there. You see that? Look. All right. You're a grand old flag. Anyway, so... but there was some stuff information we were reading, and the National Flag of Canada Day was officially proclaimed on February 15th, 1996. Isn't that awesome? I mean, we have National Flag of Canada Day, or for short, Flag Day. And Canada is the only country with a maple leaf on its flag. And it's the only population that uses maple syrup for a cologne. So there you go. What else we got on this? What can you see?
We're just gonna start reading through all of these different lists. No, I'm gonna pick some of my favorites here.
Yeah.
So fun fact: the stylized maple leaf on the flag has 11 points. I've actually heard somebody, I can't remember what I was watching. I was watching something in sports, and they said, "Oh yes, the 11-point star on the Canadian flag," and I was like, "The what?" The star on the 11-point star on the Canadian flag.
What are they talking about? A game deer or something that you're hunting?
I'm like, I don't think it's considered a star. That's a interesting looking star on your flag there, Canada.
And those points are sharp. Yep. Don't touch the flag.
It's very pointy.
Red and white are the national colors of Canada. Now, I've heard various explanations of what the red and white represents. I heard at one point the red was the blood shed by Canadian troops in both World Wars and Korea, and the white is the color of bandages. That was a tale, if you will, that people shared quite frequently about the flag. Of course, it's not true, so to speak. Red and white are the national colors of Canada because white represents snow and red represents the maple leaves when they're turning color in autumn.
Yes, and I like this one because it talks about vexillology, which is flag design and flags. And I'm one of those people. There was a brief push I had where I think that our city Niagara Falls, New York needs to redesign its city flag because I can't remember. There's actually a phrase that vexillologists refer to it. It's like a seal on a color, because they're all like, every municipal flag is just like, throw the city seal on it, throw a color behind it, and they're boring. But flag experts cite Canada as sort of the flag that is the most beautiful. It meets the criteria for what a flag should have. Interesting about flag design, since I'm into it.
Yes.
So I'm going to spew some flag knowledge on you.
Oh, great.
In good flag design, a good flag is considered, it should have 2 to 3 colors that work well together. It should be free from any sort of words or, super detail. The best way they actually say to describe a flag, design a flag is, 1, it needs to be able to be seen in the size of a postage stamp. It has to be able to register that small, because that's usually about the size you'll see it when it's flying on a building. And the other one is, I believe it's a kindergartner should be able to draw your flag roughly. It has to be simple enough that, like a kindergartner could, not well, doesn't have to look perfect, but should be able to draw out what your flag looks like. And that's why the Canadian flag is very distinct. It only has, the red and white colors. It's well balanced. It has a large symbol of the maple leaf that reads very well at a large size, at a small size, from very far away. You can see the Canadian flag and you can identify it. And the goal of flags has always been, you need to be able to identify it from a distance at a small point. The U.S. flag gets some points knocked off due to the sheer number of stars on it. It's considered not as refined because it is difficult to see all those stars from a certain distance, because there's a lot of stars, there's a lot of stripes. The colors are easy to tell because the U.S., but now there's a lot of other countries that do have similar flags to the U.S. design that from a distance do look similar, these are all just kind of interesting things. And whoever was writing this article here it's Canada, of course, it's Canada.ca, of course they're talking about this. The flag is twice as long as it is wide, and the white square...
most Canadians.
The white square is, if you take the 2 red bars on either side and put them in the center, it's the exact same width as the center white square, so it's perfectly balanced. And they're very excited about this, and they would be, because the flag design of the current Canadian flag went through so many iterations.
Oh, yes.
They opened it up to the public. And I remember reading about it, and they showed some of the entries. And people don't change. Someone sent in that the flag should have the Beatles on it. They just cut the like Paul, George, Ringo, like John, out of a magazine and glued them on a sheet and sent it into Canadian Parliament and said, "Here's your flag."
Era, yeah,
because it was the 1960s. In fact, the flag was ratified February 15th, 1965. Flag Day was made in '96 to celebrate. Flag Day was February 15th because that's when it was. That's when it was officially made the Canadian flag. Before that, the Canadian flag was a variation of the Union Jack, which you still see on the Ontario flag.
Yes.
So they are very, it's kind of funny because some of the provinces have that similar flow of the original Canadian flag being, with the Union Jack in the corner and the seal of Canada on the other portion on a red ensign. And it was, that being said, the current Canadian flag, the maple leaf, when you look at it, you can tell it was made in the 1960s. Like it has that 1960s minimalism kind of, that design. Like it's very sleek, it's symmetrical, it feels, I can see it on top of the CN Tower. Like it feels like 1960s Canada.
Noble simplicity.
Yes.
That would be it. And in 1984, the Canadian flag reached new heights, it says, when it went into space, along with the first Canadian astronaut on the Space Shuttle Challenger. And so I know Mark Hatfield and Julie Payette and several other Canadian astronauts took the flag with them. Did you know as well, just touching on the space shuttle program, they used to have an apparatus on the space shuttle called the Canadarm.
Yep.
It was made by Spar Electronics up in Mississauga. And it was proudly the Canadarm.
Had the Canada logo going right across the side of it.
You could not fool us.
If you go to Kennedy Space Center down in Florida, the Canadarm is on display on the Space Shuttle Atlantis. Yeah. It's out there, and you see it right across the side.
We believe it was a misrepresentation because for everything it did in space, you can't open a beer. There you go. But Canada has a proud association with NASA and our space program as well.
Yes.
And I think you and I were both impressed to hear about the half-masting.
Yes. So this was something I was very aware of as it was happening because, in the state park, you can see when you look at the Rainbow Bridge, and I had a tourist actually come up to me and they asked, why is the Canadian flag? So this was in 2021. And they asked me, why is the Canadian flag on the bridge at half-mast? And the reason why, and I actually knew. I didn't even have to look it up. I knew the answer because I follow CBC and I follow a lot of Canadian news. But actually, if you want to discuss this, because this is Canadian, so...
No,
go
ahead.
Okay, so the residential schools in Canada, this is sort of a dark spot in the history of Canada. These were schools where they took in children from First Nations and tried to make them, for lack of a better phrase, I'm going to say white. Yeah. They tried to whitewash their history, and it was very severe. And what we ended up started to find in 2021, and it continued, specifically in Kamloops, British Columbia, was a mass of unmarked graves of these children that previously was, I'm going to say unknown, but it was intentionally hidden. And it reared its head in 2021, and the Canadian government, just at the start, they did a lot when this started, had to face the reality of what they did. But from May 30th through November 7th of 2021, the mast was, which is honestly the entire tourist season, the entire 2021 tourist season in Niagara Falls, basically, the Canadian flag was at half-mast.
And Canada has taken it very seriously, the things that were done wrong to our native peoples. And a lot of them we're discovering now, or they're coming to light, etc. And I think it behooves any nation to stand up and address things like that. Because, like you said, their entire history, whether they were Ojibwa or from the West Coast in the area of what they call the Squamish Sea, whatever nation you were from, as you said, they were erasing that. They were trying to eradicate your entire history, and which is not something any country would be proud of. And we've seen examples throughout history around the world. But I think it really reflects on the Canadian character that we are taking it so seriously, and we are ashamed that this took place.
Yes.
And so, that was a very interesting point. You and I talked about it for a few minutes there before the show.
It is interesting because here on the American side of Niagara Falls, we have our own wrongdoing, specifically with the Tuscarora Nation and the Tuscarora Reservation, which this was land, they had already been put into a reservation that was not near their native land. And then that land was taken by Robert Moses and eventually the United States Supreme Court to build the reservoir for the power project. As the United States argued, one, it was a need of the greater good, we needed electricity, and two, that this wasn't their original land, so their claim was limited. But what's really shocking about is, one, this wasn't that long ago. This was in the late 1950s we were doing this. We were taking the Tuscarora Reservation. We took over half of it to build the reservoir. But now, to this day, currently, there are still water supply issues at the Tuscarora Reservation. We cut off, the way the water supply was cut off, it has caused issues with not only being able to get water at the reservation, but also water quality issues at the Tuscarora Reservation. It is common to see bottled water being bussed in, and this is something that still hasn't been settled. And it is 2023, and this is still an ongoing issue. So, when we talk about, what happened in Canada, what happened in the U.S., and these stories of things that happened, and we're saying, oh, they happened, so they are still happening. There were issues in Canada over on the West Coast with the oil pipelines. And there were lots of protests about the oil pipelines and them cutting through, sovereign First Nation land. And, the ramifications of that, and these pipelines, not necessarily, are they safe? Are they not safe? Are they leaking? And, how are they maintained? And do they have a right to cut through this land? Are they going to, affect the water supply? Are they going to affect the viability of this land? This is our land, and you're deciding you're going to do this without, we tell you no, you say yes. These are issues that are still going on today. And they happen locally, and they happen right across the continent. They are, in both Canada and the United States, these issues are still ongoing.
Well, there's obviously a room for redress there, and I'm glad you brought up the Tuscarora Nation. I took a group today that were from Indonesia, and I took them to the Power Authority, and we were down on the lower level, and they have a beautiful display of Tuscarora culture there. And I was just thinking that it's very hard to tell the story of this wonderful culture and not, in the back of your mind, carry the thought of what they went through, what they sacrificed for all of that power generation, etc. So, a really powerful story. And, when it comes to tourism, actually, it's interesting that you would broach on this as well, that in tourism, we're not always about flowers and happiness. We're not showing you candy and colors and big smiles and Disney. Tourism is often a term applied to almost every form of travel and experiential travel that we do. And here in this area and in North America, the situation with Native Americans is of great interest to many people around the world. Hollywood fabricated a lot of the beliefs and misinterpretations of Native culture for many years, and now we're seeing truths brought out and stories that were hidden and buried and unmarked, if you will. And I think that when we're in the tourism business, we're not all about cotton candy. We're about the truth and the experiences and the realities that happen there. And there is an audience. There are people who, they don't want to come and hear horror stories all the time, but they want to be aware of what went on. They want to be aware of Love Canal. They want to be aware of what was committed to on the Native peoples. Because you really do have, in the last 500 years, an entire continent of Europe arriving here and basically pushing people out of the way.
Yes.
So, I mean, I don't want to take up a cause right now or sound like I'm crusading, but it's definitely an interesting point within tourism that I get a lot of people asking me about, is the history of natives here.
Yes, and that's, Niagara Falls is very specifically that, it's Niagara. It's a native word.
Yes.
It comes from, and there's debate on the exact translation. The general consensus that it comes from Ankara, which means thundering waters, right, or large strait. And we don't even know if that's accurate, because it's and some of that is, some of that history, it was a lot of oral history that unfortunately was wiped away. But one of the things, and that is kind of goes back to what we were talking about 2 weeks ago when we were talking about the Underground Railroad Heritage Center, with museums are not neutral. Tourism is not neutral. And there's been a lot of the long history of most tourist sites, but, speaking about Niagara Falls here, Niagara Falls has a colorful history, is a nice way of putting it, but questionable history is probably the more accurate.
Right.
There are things that have been done in Niagara Falls that aren't necessarily for the best in the best interests of people, or in the best interest of a select few people and, certain pocketbooks and certain things that have happened. And what we're seeing now, and there was a lot of, we want to see the whitewashed version of Niagara Falls. We want this fantasy idea of tourism. And there was a long time where people chased that idea of, there's still, and, there are pieces, the Maid of the Mist, the idea of the Maid of the Mist, and just the actual legend of the Maid of the Mist.
Yeah.
When you look at the interpretation of it from even going back to the 1950s, have you ever gotten a Legend of the Maid of the Mist postcard?
No, I think I have.
Have you seen them?
One of them.
Have you've seen what they look like?
I'm trying to recall, but I might have. But
okay, so the Legend of the Maid of the Mist postcards that they were selling well through the 1960s would be of a Native American woman naked going over the falls in a canoe because, well, that's the legend. But if you look at the way it's drawn, there is, I'm not even going to sugarcoat this. They are racist and they are sexist. These postcards are severe. They are drawn with the male gaze in mind. There is that.
Yep.
You can see what we're not focusing on the history of the legend on this. And this was something that was so common that it's shocking to see today. If you go into an antique store, you can find one. They made water slick decals that you could put on the side of your luggage. This isn't something that was hidden behind. You'd put it on your luggage. Wow. And this was, there is another concept with Native Americans and the idea of otherism and, well, we can, things that we're prudish about, we can show on them because they're
savages.
There's this, and that is something that now, as time has moved on, we look back at that and you realize how bad it is. And that's, going back to what we were talking about a few weeks ago, where people are looking back at their collections, museums are looking back where they got their stuff. People are having to look back at these institutions. We've changed names of places here in Western New York because the name comes from derogatory and offensive phrasing that is no longer appropriate in today's day and age. And that is the sign of a community understanding and coming to terms with its ugly past history to move forward in a positive direction.
That's a good way of putting it. I remember when I was out west, 2009, I was at the Little Bighorn. And of course, that's known as Custer's Last Stand. And I have to flash back to about 30 years ago. I was at a family home. A member of my family was in Auburn, New York, and had just bought a house there. And in the wall, we found a boy's journal from 1912. This journal had been hidden, I guess, behind his bed or in the wall. And we read it, and he would constantly refer to General Custer as the example of the man you wanted to be. And I mean, through much of American history, Custer's Last Stand was seen as the greatest defeat of the American West, the Army in the American West. And when I went there back in 2009, I was really encouraged that in addition to the markers for the troopers who fell there, were markers for the native warriors who had fallen. And the way their markers are etched, it says on there, fell here defending the Cheyenne way of life, or or Sanzark, or whichever nation they were. As I said earlier, people refer to Native Americans as savages and as uncivilized, and Hollywood perpetuated that. And as you've mentioned, everything from the island in Buffalo to a lot of the history here. I mean, there's a lot more to this as well. Are you familiar with the Beaver Wars?
Yeah, I've heard bits and pieces.
Where Native peoples fought over the fur trade themselves. Yes. And this area was taken by the Seneca, from what I understand. And the neutrals who were in this area were driven into Ontario. And so there's a lot to this history.
There is, and it's important that we look at that history and we respect that history. And also because there was, at a time, at first there was, what you say, there was the cowboys. We wouldn't call them Native Americans. We called them Indians because Christopher Columbus thought he was in India. And even like right down to the state park, which I appreciate in the state park, is immediately like right next to that rock, Hennepin's Rock, where it says first European, is the plaque talking about the people that were here before. The people whose land this was. That plaque is, and it's intentional why it is put there, is they want you to know, okay, you're looking where the first European stood. That European wouldn't have even stood here if it wasn't for these people leading him there. They were here for thousands of years before, and that's the entire history is there. But even like then there was the history of the gentle native. And it was sort of this aggressive reversal where it was like, well, I was taught, it was like, oh, they were so kind and they didn't know anything and they were this and that. And the truth is, they were people. Like you talk about the Beaver Wars and these wars, they were people, just as they are still people. It is just as dynamic with the full gamut of human emotions and love, hate, war, peace, all of it. And to just water everything down to something that's just like an easy pill to swallow because we want to fill one page in a textbook somewhere is a horrible disservice to the history of this, the land, the history of this region. It's something that, and if you are a tourist here and you want to know the history, find yourself a tour guide that knows the stories, that really has done research, that really knows what, that aren't just regurgitating these, stereotypical, whitewashed stories, that are telling the real truths of Niagara.
Because it's much like Niagara has eroded over the years, it's moved, and so have the stories and the perceptions of it. So this is something we can actually spend a show on, and I'm pretty sure I can get someone from the Tuscarora Nation to come down. And I'm kind of glad we got into this today because it would be an interesting story for the future. As we're coming into the final moments here, I know we want to show a quick video. It's actually about an 8-minute video, but it ties in with one last piece of news we're going to share today. Yes. And that is about Niagara Jet Adventures. It was in today's Niagara Gazette and has been reported elsewhere that Niagara Jet Adventures is closing. They were operating from Youngstown, New York, and they had enclosed or open jet boats that would go from Youngstown all the way up into the Whirlpool. And they also operating in that industry is Whirlpool jet boats, great operation. So it's not like one was better than the other, but unfortunately post-COVID and the impact that it had on the industry, the Niagara Jet Adventures is closing. And it's very sad. I did work in the shipping industry, Great Lakes for a bit and for a while, a few years. And something I can tell you is that when you run a water operation, I think pretty sure, yes, your insurance alone is phenomenal. I remember one boat that I worked on, we had to carry $20 billion in coverage, and that's expensive. And then every other cost associated with it, and crew and training. So it's very sad to see Niagara Jet Adventures closing. I have done their boats; they're a lot of fun, and we do have a video from back in. I'm not sure the year, but was it 2003? Maybe it was after that. It'll probably show up in the video. But Nico, we'll come back with some final comments. But I think we could show this, and it would be kind of fun to see. This is when the Niagara Jet Adventure boats went from Youngstown, New York, all the way to the falls. They got special permission from the U.S. and Canadian Coast Guard to transit the Whirlpool Rapids. Now, those of you who are weak of heart, don't envision yourself in the cabin here, because you'll see they get tossed around quite a bit.
Oh, yes.
But here we go. It's 8 minutes long, folks, and we'll give our wrap-up comments after that. But check this out. They should give the date. 2013.
Well, I can take you over to I'll show you where Vanderbilt is.
Okay, we need to drive there.
Yeah.
There's a hole there that
Slowly up.
take us down. We hit that, and it'll just take that boat. It'll happen quick. Yeah, boat said it ain't nothing but a big thing, but maybe try it. It's a big thing.
All the stories here, and that especially over the last 2 days of being here, walking the river, and we'd sit in the restaurant, we'd ask people, hey, you ever heard of jet boats running that river? People just laugh and say people die in there.
That was wild.
I will say nothing says 2013 more than a dubstep remix of Skyrim music playing in the background. like I'm looking up like 2013. I'm like, yeah, 2013. That's about right. Where were you in 2013, Peter?
Me, I was between knee replacements, 2 of them in a year.
I was in high school.
Were you?
Yes.
Oh, heck, I was already a dad 3 times over, and oh, boy. But no, folks, it's been a pleasant evening. Thank you for letting us into your minds and your tourism hearts, and we'll be back next week. Julian will be here with us. Yes. And other than that, any last words from you there, Nico?
Stay safe out there. Gotta enjoy this weather. It's like 60 degrees outside this week. It's like it's dropping down to like 30 on Friday, but today it was actually, I wasn't even wearing a coat. People are walking out. Well, people are walking around in shorts anyway. This is Western New York, but negative 20. They're out there, like their blood's made out of Frank's Red Hot.
Ain't that the truth? Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We'll see you next week here on Your Niagara Falls Experience.